In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this simple but not so boring gardening cart. This build could really be split into two builds, or rather, a build and a facelift. To start, I needed to make the main cart carcass. I started by cutting all of the panels I needed to size out of plywood. I had this leftover hardwood panel that I decided to use for the top. Now that I had all of my panels cut, I needed to pre-drill for assembly. Knowing I was going to be covering the outside with pallets, I wasn't worried about hiding the screws. On the bottom of each side, I pre-drilled for the base panel, and about 2/3 up I drilled for a shelf. To attach the top, I used pocket holes. I could then glue and screw the box together. Now, do you see what I did wrong here? Last to install was the back panel. I just pre-drilled and screwed this all in one go. Now, if you just wanted a boring shelf or a boring cart, you could just stop here, add on some casters and some doors, and you'd be done. But I can't just stop at plywood, I need to make it a little bit better. So now, I started the tedious task of preparing the pallets. Luckily, the pallets are meant to look random, so I wasn't concerned about keeping them long. Because of that, I could use my jigsaw and just cut the pallets up. Now that I had all of the pallets cut up, I could run them through the thicknesser and bring them down to roughly 5mm or about 1/8 of an inch. I cut the panels to random lengths with my miter saw, ensuring both ends were square. Now it's just apply glue and nail in place randomly. Once the glue was dry, I could use a flush cut saw to trim the panels flush with the front of the cabinet. Unfortunately, I didn't have a plywood panel big enough for the doors, but fortunately I could use the paneling to my advantage. I cut 2 panels oversized, which I could then use to make a big panel with the pallets, using them to glue the 2 panels together. Once the panel is dry, I can then cut it to the same width as the cabinet, and then cut it down the middle to form 2 doors. Using a self-centering drill bit, I could pre-drill and install the doors with hinges. Using some scrap hardwood, I could make some handles. I cut 2 square lengths on the table saw and then ran them through again with the saw at 45 degrees to take off one of the corners. Using a hand plane, I cleaned up all of the sides of the handles and added a chamfer to the opposing corner that was taken off with the table saw. I somehow lost the footage of installing the handles, but I just pre-drilled and screwed them on the front of the doors. I added a small round over to the top and sanded. Now it was time to apply finish. I used boiled linseed oil mainly because it's just what I have laying around. I use it for most of my projects because it's cheap, it's easy, and I can buy it in bulk. Once the finish was dry, I installed some casters and some magnetic door catchers, and this build is finished.